The king spent a fortune trying to cure his twins, but the new maid discovered the whole truth. Before we begin this beautiful period romance story, tell me in the comments where you're listening from. I love knowing where you're joining me from. The coach wheels rattled over uneven stones, then stopped so abruptly that Claire almost slid off the narrow bench. For a moment, she just sat there, clutching the small bundle of her belongings, staring at the open door and the world beyond it. A man in a dark livery appeared in the frame. His expression was tired, impatient, as if he had been waiting too long for her. "Claire Moreau?" he asked. "Yes, monsieur," she answered, her voice smaller than she wished. "Come then. His Majesty does not like delays." She stepped down, her boots landing on the courtyard stones of Versailles. The palace rose high before her, all stone and windows and endless rows of chimneys. It looked less like a place of dreams than a place that demanded something from everyone who entered. She swallowed and pressed her bundle to her chest. The air was cold enough to bite, but beneath it there was another chill, one that had nothing to do with winter. The servant turned and walked briskly ahead. Claire hurried after him, her steps echoing faintly. Grooms and stable boys moved about with downcast eyes. A carriage rolled past, its curtains drawn. Two ladies in silk crossed the courtyard without a word, their skirts gliding, their faces tight. No one looked happy. No one looked restful. Inside, the palace smelled of wax and soap and something faintly medicinal. Candles burned, even though it was still afternoon. The corridors were not filled with music or laughter, but with quiet murmurs and the distant creak of doors. "Keep up," the servant said without turning. "I am," she murmured. They climbed a staircase and entered a long corridor lined with portraits. Kings and queens stared down with severe painted eyes. Claire felt their gaze follow her as she passed. Her heart beat faster, but she forced her chin up. She had come for work, not for dreams. At last the servant stopped before a door with polished brass handles. "The chief housekeeper will see you," he said. "Remember, you are here to serve. You will do as you are told. The children are fragile. Any mistake will cost you your position." He knocked sharply and opened the door without waiting for a reply. Inside, a woman in a dark dress and white cap stood beside a writing desk. Her back was straight, her face narrow and controlled. She looked Claire over from head to toe as if she were a piece of furniture. "You are the girl from Saint-Maur?" the woman asked. "Yes, madame. Claire Moreau. I am Madame Besson, chief housekeeper." The woman's voice held no warmth, but no open cruelty either. "You come with some experience?" "I worked for the local doctor in my village," Claire said. "I cleaned, cooked, and sometimes watched the patient's children when they were ill. He wrote a letter for me." She unfolded the worn paper from her bundle and offered it. Madame Besson took it, read quickly, and gave a short nod. "The king has demanded a nurse who is gentle and patient," she said. "The physicians want someone obedient who will not interfere. You will attempt to be both, do you understand?" "I will do my best, madame." "The royal twins are in delicate health. You must follow the physician's instructions exactly. No village remedies, no ideas of your own. Only what is prescribed. You will be with them day and night except when relieved. You will speak to them softly, keep them calm, and inform the physicians of any change. And you will never speak to anyone about what you see without permission. Is that clear?" The words day and night rang in Claire's ears. She nodded quickly. "Yes, madame, I understand." Madame Besson studied her a moment longer, as if weighing her soul, then gestured toward another door. "Come. His Majesty wishes to see all who approach his children. You will be presented briefly, then you will begin." Claire's hands felt cold on her bundle. She wiped her palms against her skirt and followed. They passed through another corridor, smaller and quieter, then turned into a room guarded by two men in uniforms. The guards stepped aside at Madame Besson's approach. Claire felt their eyes on her plain dress and simple shoes, but they said nothing. "His Majesty is inside with the physicians," Madame Besson murmured. "You will remain silent unless spoken to. Keep your head bowed." Claire swallowed. "Yes, madame." They entered. The room was not large, yet it felt heavy. Curtains were drawn, muting the light. Two small beds stood near the far wall, each with a thin figure lying upon it. Between them, a table held glass bottles, cloths, and a copper basin. At the foot of the beds stood three men in fine coats, their heads together, talking in low voices. Near the window stood the king. Claire recognized him at once, not from paintings, but from the weight he carried. His hair, once dark, was threaded with grey. Lines cut deep around his mouth and eyes. He was not imposing in height, but there was something in the way the others turned toward him that made the air shift. He looked toward the door as it opened. His gaze landed on Madame Besson, then on Claire. "This is the new maid, sire," Madame Besson said, curtsying deeply. "Claire Moreau from the village of Saint-Maur, recommended by a physician." Claire bent into a clumsy curtsy, forcing her eyes to the floor. "Raise your head," the king said quietly. She obeyed. His eyes were not cold. They were tired, shadowed, as if he had not slept properly in weeks. He studied her for a moment. She had the brief impression that he saw not just her dress and hands, but the fear beneath them. "You have cared for sick children before?" he asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," she answered, her voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. "In my village, I helped the doctor. I watched over little ones when their mothers were too tired. I know how to keep a room quiet. I can sit without sleeping. I can notice when something is wrong." There was a faint movement among the physicians behind him, as if they disapproved of peasants noticing anything. The king's gaze flicked to them, then back to her. "In this palace," he said, "noticing is dangerous, but it can also save lives." One of the physicians cleared his throat. "Sire, with respect, we must insist that the maid follow our instructions without deviation. The condition of the prince and princess is complex. Too many hands will only confuse the matter." The king did not take his eyes off Claire. "What is your greatest virtue, girl?" he asked. "Honesty or obedience?" The question struck her like a cold wind. Her heartbeat roared in her ears. For a moment she wished she could choose the safer answer, but she thought of the children in her village, of their hot foreheads and frightened eyes, and of the trust their mothers had placed in her. "Your Majesty," she said quietly, "I will obey as much as I can, but if I see something that harms the children, I do not believe I could keep silent." A sharp intake of breath came from one of the men behind the king. Madame Besson stiffened at Claire's side. Silence fell like a curtain. The king's mouth twitched, not quite into a smile. "Interesting," he murmured. "Perhaps that is exactly what we need." "Sire," one physician began. "Enough, Valcourt," the king said, his tone flat with command. "You have had no shortage of obedience in this palace. Let us see what honesty accomplishes." He turned back to Claire. "You will watch over my children," he said. "You will follow the physician's orders. You will also inform me if you believe something is amiss. You will do this with care and respect. Can you promise that?" "Yes, Your Majesty," she whispered. "Then go," he said softly. "Meet them." Madame Besson touched Claire's elbow, guiding her around the physicians. As she passed, one of them, a tall man with cold eyes and carefully arranged hair, looked her up and down. "I am Monsieur Valcourt, chief physician," he said. "You will report to me any change in the children's state. You will not administer anything that I have not approved. And you will not speak to the king of medical matters without first consulting me. Do you understand?" Claire met his gaze only briefly, then lowered hers. "I understand what His Majesty asked of me," she replied. Madame Besson's fingers tightened, a silent warning. Monsieur Valcourt's eyes narrowed, but he said nothing else. Claire turned to the small beds. The prince lay on the left, the princess on the right. They appeared to be 8 or 9 years old, though their thinness and stillness made them seem younger. Henri's hair was a soft brown, his face sharp with angles. Elise's hair was a little lighter, her features softer, but both had the same delicate nose and the same faintly bluish shadows under their eyes. Their eyes were open but heavy. They watched her approach as someone might watch a bird land on a branch, quietly, without much expectation. Madame Besson murmured, "This is Mademoiselle Claire. She will take care of you." Claire forced herself to smile. "Your Highnesses," she said softly. "It is an honor. I hope we shall become friends." Henri's lips curved a little. "Do friends bow that low?" he asked, his voice hoarse but playful. Claire straightened. "Well, if we are friends, perhaps we might shorten the bow," she said. "And you may call me Claire if you wish." Elise's gaze sharpened a little. "You are not afraid of the physicians?" she whispered. Claire glanced toward the men at the far side of the room, speaking again in low tones. Then she looked back at the girl. "I am new," she said. "I have not yet had time to be afraid of anyone." Elise's mouth opened slightly, then closed. A faint gleam appeared in her eyes, as if a small candle had been lit. Madame Besson stepped back. "You will remain here," she told Claire. "A cot will be brought for you. If you require anything, you may ring for the attendants. Do not disturb the physicians unless it is necessary." She curtsied to the king and left. The physicians followed, leaving a trail of murmured Latin and important-sounding phrases. The king stood a moment longer, watching his children. He crossed to Elise, brushed her hair from her forehead, then did the same for Henri. "Rest," he said softly. "I will return this evening." He gave Claire one last look. "Remember," he said, "notice." Then he left the room and the door closed gently behind him. For the first time, the chamber was quiet. Claire let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. She turned to the children again. "Shall I tell you a story?" she asked. "Or are you too tired?" Henri blinked slowly. "What kind of story?" he asked. "Something from my village," she said, "about the miller's son who tried to steal the wind." Elise frowned faintly. "One cannot steal the wind," she said. "That is what everyone told him," Claire replied, but no one had counted on his foolishness. Henri's lips twitched again. "Tell us," he said. She pulled a chair between their beds and sat, keeping her voice low and steady. She spoke of the clumsy miller's son who climbed the hills, tried to capture the wind in baskets and jars, who fell into ditches and frightened the geese. The children's eyes followed her face, their expressions flickering, their breathing slow and regular. "You see," Claire said at last, "he never did steal the wind, but he learned how to listen to it. And that was better. That is not a proper ending," Henri murmured. "It is the only one I have," she answered. The afternoon passed in a haze of small things. Claire fluffed pillows, smoothed blankets, checked that cups of water were within reach. She listened to the ticking of the clock and the children's occasional questions. Sometimes they dozed, sometimes they simply stared at the ceiling. "Do you hurt?" she asked quietly, when Elise winced as she shifted. "A little," the girl answered. "But it is the tiredness that is worst. It is like walking in a dream." "Does it come suddenly?" Claire asked. Elise considered. "Sometimes," she said. "Sometimes I feel almost well and then someone comes and it begins again." "Who?" Claire asked gently. Elise shrugged, then made a small face. "I should not say," she whispered. "Nurse before you told me not to complain. She said it was impolite." "It is not impolite to say what hurts," Claire replied. "It is helpful." Henri turned his head on the pillow. "It is mostly after visits," he said. "After people fuss and touch and bring bottles. That is when it becomes worst." Claire felt a chill at the base of her spine. She smoothed his blanket. "Then we shall pay attention," she said lightly. "We shall see whether you are right. And if you are, we shall give the physicians something to think about." "Do not make them angry," Elise whispered. "I do not enjoy anger," Claire said, "but I dislike ignorance even more." The children were too tired to laugh, but Henri's eyes warmed. Late in the afternoon, footsteps sounded in the corridor. A faint murmur rose outside the door, then the handle turned. Claire stood quickly and stepped back. Two ladies entered first, their dresses rustling softly. Behind them came a woman whose presence seemed to alter the room all at once. She was not exceptionally tall, but she was as composed as a statue. Her gown was pale lavender, simple but perfectly cut. Pearls gleamed at her ears. Her hair was pinned with mathematical precision. Her eyes, a cool grey, swept over the room, taking everything in, assessing it in a heartbeat. "Your Highness," one of the ladies murmured, curtsying. "Announce me properly," the woman said. "Her Grace, Duchess Helene," the lady said hastily, "sister-in-law to His Majesty." Claire bowed her head. Duchess Helene moved forward, the faint scent of something sweet preceding her. "How are my dear niece and nephew today?" she asked in a voice that glided like silk. Henri hesitated. "As you see, Your Grace," he said. Elise tried to smile. "We are better," she murmured. "No, my darling, you are pale and wan," the Duchess said, brushing a finger across her cheek. "I fear they do not do enough for you. Men of science can be so slow." She glanced at Claire. "And you are the new girl," she said. "What is your name?" "Claire, Your Grace." "From some distant field, no doubt." "From Saint-Maur, Your Grace." "Ah." The Duchess said the name as though it were a stain on the carpet. "You will keep this room orderly, Claire. Chaos is very bad for delicate nerves. Yes, Your Grace. The Duchess opened a small reticule at her wrist and drew out a slender glass vial. Its contents were a pale golden liquid that caught the candlelight. I have brought something to ease you, she said to the children. A comforting essence, recommended by a most refined apothecary in Lyon. Only the finest idle persiflage here believes in plain air and water. She laughed softly at her own remark. Her ladies tittered. Claire watched as Duchess Hélène uncorked the vial. At once a sweet, heavy perfume spread into the air. It was not unpleasant, but it clung to the back of the throat. The Duchess poured a few drops onto a linen cloth and waved it gently above the children's pillows. "Breathe, my dears," she cooed. "This will calm you. You will sleep more peacefully, and you shall not trouble your father so with your suffering." Henri's nose wrinkled slightly. "It is strong," he said. "It is exquisite," the Duchess corrected. "You simply are not used to refinement." Elise took a breath, then coughed lightly. "Does it hurt?" Claire asked softly. "No," Elise said quickly, glancing at her aunt. "It is only heavy." Claire stepped closer, but one of the ladies moved subtly between her and the bed, as if to block an advance she had not even intended. Duchess Hélène turned to Claire. "You will keep this by their bedside," she said, placing the vial on the small table between the beds. "Each time they grow restless, you will release a few drops onto a cloth. The physicians are too slow. This will give them immediate relief." "Do you understand?" Claire hesitated. "Should I not ask Monsieur Valcourt first?" she said. The Duchess's eyes hardened almost imperceptibly. "I have already discussed this with him," she lied with ease. "Are you suggesting I mislead you?" "No, Your Grace," Claire murmured quickly. "Then there is nothing more to say." The Duchess gave a small, practiced smile. "Remember, a little scent, and their suffering will ease. You must not be shy about using it." She turned back to the children, stroked their hair for a moment, then straightened. "I expect to see you stronger on my next visit," she said. "His Majesty cannot bear much more worry. Neither can the kingdom." She glided from the room, her ladies following. The perfume lingered like a veil. For a few minutes the room was quiet again. The children lay still. Claire watched them closely. "How do you feel?" she asked. Henri blinked slowly. "A bit light," he muttered. "My head is fuzzy." "I do not like it." Elise's eyelids drooped. "I am tired," she whispered. "More than before." "It has only been a few minutes," Claire said, frowning. "Perhaps it will pass." But as the evening crept in, their weakness seemed to deepen. When Monsieur Valcourt returned to examine them, he seemed unsurprised. "They are no better," he announced to the king, who had come back as soon as he heard the Duchess had visited. "We must increase the strength of the remedies. Clearly their condition is more stubborn than we hoped." The king rubbed his forehead. "Do what you must," he said. "I cannot bear to see them like this." "Of course, sire," Valcourt said smoothly. "We are fortunate to have such rare essences and treatments at our disposal. Many countries would envy our resources." He did not even glance at the vial on the table. Or perhaps he did, and simply saw nothing unusual in it. The evening passed with more consultations, low-voiced debates and careful adjustments of glowing bottles. Claire remained near the children, offering sips of water, wiping their foreheads. She watched the way their hands trembled, the way their speech grew slower, the way their eyes seemed to struggle to focus. When at last the physicians left and the king kissed his children good-night, the room quieted again. Night settled fully. A single lamp burned low. Claire sat between the beds, listening to their breathing. It was even but heavier than before, as if every breath had to be pulled from far away. She glanced at the vial on the table. The golden liquid caught the lamplight again. The room still held a faint trace of its perfume. "Do you like that scent?" she asked softly. Henri, half asleep, muttered, "No." Elise did not answer. Her face was peaceful, but her hands gripped the sheet. Claire rose quietly and crossed to the window. She opened it a little, just enough to let in a breath of cool air. The night slid in, gentle and clean. She saw in the distance the pale outline of the gardens. She closed the window again so the children would not grow cold, then turned back. The smell of the essence had already weakened with the fresh air, but it still lingered around the beds. 3 times that night, the children stirred. Henri groaned softly. Elise whispered that her chest felt tight. Each time Claire considered reaching for the vial as instructed, then pulled her hand back. "Your Grace said to use it when they are restless," the Duchess's voice echoed in her mind. But her memory of the children's sudden heaviness, the way their eyes had dulled so quickly, pushed against that command. "Try to breathe slowly," she whispered instead, smoothing their hair, humming a quiet melody she remembered from her mother. "Think of something you like. Think of the sound of rain on the roof. Think of warm bread." The episodes passed after a while. The children sank into a deeper sleep, though it did not look peaceful. Still, Claire did not touch the vial. Morning came with pale, watery light sliding around the curtains. The children woke late, still exhausted. When the physicians came, they spoke of lingering weakness and mysterious conditions. No one asked about the perfume, about what had changed between afternoon and now. That day followed much the same pattern. The children were quiet, often drowsy. They spoke little. Claire told stories, sang softly, adjusted pillows. She listened to them describe how the tiredness sometimes came upon them like a wave. "It is worst when there are many visitors," Henri said once, "when they fuss and talk and make us use all the bottles." "Or when Aunt Hélène comes," Elise added in a whisper. "The smell makes my head heavy." "Does it always?" Claire asked. Elise nodded. "Almost always," she said. In the afternoon, Duchess Hélène visited again. The same sweetness filled the air. She smiled, cooed, demanded that Claire bring a fresh cloth for the essence. "His Majesty must see you calmer," she said. "You must not disturb him with your suffering." Claire obeyed, unable to protest under the Duchess's steady gaze. The drops fell onto the cloth. The scent lifted, then spread. The children inhaled because they had no choice. Within an hour, Elise's eyes drooped. Henry's hand shook when he reached for his cup. Their voices thickened. That evening, when everything was quiet again and the palace seemed to hold its breath, Claire sat in the dim nursery, turning the events over and over in her mind. She watched the children. She watched the vial. "This cannot be a coincidence," she whispered to herself. "It cannot be." She waited until the twins were deeply asleep, their breathing slow and deep. Then she stood, moving as softly as she could. She crossed the narrow space between the beds and the small table. The vial stood there, innocent and gleaming. Someone had left it uncorked. A faint tendril of perfume still rose from it. Carefully, she picked it up. It was light in her hand, fragile. She lifted it closer to her face, sniffed cautiously, and felt the same heaviness in her throat, the same dull press against her temples. Her heart began to pound. "What are you?" she murmured. "What are they making these children breathe?" She glanced toward the door. No one stood there. The corridor beyond was silent. She closed her fingers around the vial as if taking hold of the question itself. For the first time, she dared to think the thought that had been circling her mind since the previous day. What if the illness was not some mysterious curse from outside, but something brought into the room by those who claimed to help? Her grip tightened. She turned to carry the vial to the lamplight, to examine it more closely, perhaps to hide it until she could ask someone she trusted. The handle of the door turned with a soft click. Claire froze. The door opened, and a cold, precise voice cut through the stillness. "What do you think you are doing with that girl?" Monsieur Valcourt stood in the doorway, his dark coat sharply outlined against the light of the corridor. His eyes went first to Claire's hand, then to the vial, then to the sleeping children. For a moment no one moved. Claire felt the glass cold and smooth in her fingers. Her throat tightened. She began. "I found it open. I was only—" Valcourt crossed the room in 3 long steps. He did not raise his voice, but the air changed as if a window had been shut. "Give it to me," he said. She hesitated, then placed the vial carefully in his outstretched hand. "It was uncorked," she said. "The scent was very strong. The children seemed—" "You presume to judge medicines by their scent?" he asked. "What are you, Mademoiselle Moreau? A trained physician, an apothecary, or a village girl who cleaned floors and watched coughs?" "I watched more than coughs," she said quietly, "and I have eyes. Each time this essence is used, they grow weaker." His gaze sharpened. "You accuse this essence?" he asked. "This carefully prepared, costly and approved essence. Do you wish to insult the judgment of those who chose it, or the generosity of her grace, who provides it at no charge for their comfort?" "I do not wish to insult anyone," Claire answered, forcing her voice to remain steady. I wish to know why the children suffer more whenever it is near. Valcour's mouth thinned. Superstitious nonsense, he said. Every cure can cause discomfort. Their condition fluctuates. You mistake coincidence for cause. That is why maids do not make diagnoses. He turned the vial in his fingers. This is not your concern, he continued. Your duty is to change linens, bring water, and soothe fears. Leave the thinking to those qualified to do it. Claire felt heat rise to her face. His Majesty asked me to notice, she said. I am doing as he asked. The king is a father in torment, Valcour replied. He clings to any word that sounds like hope. It is our task to protect him from foolishness. In future, you will not touch any remedy. Not this essence, not any bottle, unless I tell you. Do you understand? Yes, monsieur, she said softly. If you have concerns, you bring them to me, he added. Not to the king, not to any other member of the court, to me. You will not disturb his Majesty with baseless suspicions. If you do, you will be dismissed before nightfall. Is that clear enough? Her fingers twisted in her apron. Yes, she whispered. He slipped the vial into his coat. I will keep this for now, he said. Her grace is generous, but even generosity can be misused by careless hands. He gave her one last hard look, then moved to the beds. He checked Henri's pulse, lifted Elise's eyelids, muttered a few notes and left the room with a small nod. The door closed. Claire remained standing between the beds, her heart pounding. The children slept on, unaware. She sank slowly into her chair. Her hands still trembled from the encounter. It was not fear of Valcour himself that unsettled her. It was the ease with which he had dismissed what seemed so obvious to her. Coincidence, he had said. But she did not believe it. Days passed. The rhythm of the palace settled around her. Mornings began with soft knocks, quiet greetings, the rustle of linens. The physicians came, took pulses, murmured in Latin, and left. The king appeared whenever he could, his presence a brief warmth in the cold room. He smiled for his children, but the smile rarely reached his eyes. Duchess Helene visited regularly. Sometimes she brought books, sometimes she brought new toys. Always she brought the scent. After that first night, Claire rarely saw the vial clearly. Valcour or one of his assistants would produce it from a pocket or from a case, sprinkle a few drops onto a cloth, and wave it above the pillows with practiced care. The perfume spread, soft and insistent. The children inhaled because they had no choice. Each time the same pattern followed. At first a quiet calm, then a deeper heaviness. Their eyes grew duller, their limbs slackened, their voices faded. Sometimes Henri tried to fight it. Not again, he muttered once as Valcour drew near with the scented cloth. This is for your good, Valcour said smoothly. You wish to rest without pain, do you not, Highness? Henri pressed his lips together, but he did not answer. Claire saw the way his fingers clenched, then loosened as the scent washed over him. Elise rarely protested, but afterward, when the room was empty, she would whisper to Claire. It makes me feel far away, she said, as if I am looking at myself from the ceiling, and then everything is too heavy to move. Do you feel less pain? Claire asked. Sometimes, Elise admitted, but I do not feel much of anything. Claire's jaw tightened. If you do not wish it, she said, you must say so. They will not listen, Elise replied. They say I am a child and do not know what helps me. Perhaps you know better than they think, Claire said. She wanted to say more. She wanted to storm after Valcour, to demand answers, to shout that whatever they were doing was wrong. But she saw the way servants were dismissed for the smallest offences. She saw the delicate thread by which her place near the children hung, so she watched. She counted the times the essence was used. She noted the hours after each use. She saw how much weaker the children were on days filled with visitors and scents than on quiet days with open windows and simple meals. Her thoughts turned in circles until they made her dizzy. One afternoon, Madame Besson found her standing by the window, staring out at the grey sky. You are not here to dream, Mademoiselle Moreau, the housekeeper said. Has something been left undone? No, Madame, Claire said. The children are resting. Then sit where they can see you when they wake, Madame Besson replied. They must not feel alone. But you must also remember your place. I have heard that you spoke rather boldly to Monsieur Valcour. Claire swallowed. I only said what I had seen, she said. The children are not your responsibility alone, Madame Besson cut in. You have a tender heart, that is clear. But tender hearts can break easily in a house like this. Be careful where you place your courage." She left without waiting for an answer. That evening, as the lamps were lit in the corridor and the palace settled into a muffled quiet, a small visitor came to the nursery. He was a boy of perhaps 12, in a neat but simple uniform, carrying a tray with fresh linen. Claire had seen him before, darting through the servants' quarters with messages. "Good evening, Mademoiselle Claire," he said shyly. "Good evening, Luc," she replied, surprised that he knew her name. "Everyone knows your name now," he said. "You are the maid who speaks to the king." She winced. "I spoke when he asked me a question," she said, "that is all." He set the tray down carefully. "My mother works in the kitchens," he went on. "She says you must be brave or foolish." "I think you are brave," she smiled faintly. "I am mostly frightened," she said. "But thank you." He leaned closer. "I have seen the Duchess's carriage come and go," he whispered. "Always when the bells ring at 3. The servants say she brings magic to the children. Do you think it is really magic?" Claire shook her head. "No," she said. "I think it is something far more ordinary, and sometimes ordinary things can be more dangerous than magic." He looked puzzled, but there was no time to explain. Footsteps sounded in the corridor, and Luc straightened quickly, took up his empty tray, and slipped out. The next day the palace was busier than usual. Voices floated faintly from beyond the nursery. Doors opened and closed more often. Servants moved faster. Even the guards in the corridor seemed more alert. In the late morning, Madame Besson swept into the nursery with an air of importance. "His Majesty will address the court this afternoon in the Golden Hall," she said. "The physicians will present their latest recommendations. The king wishes the children's nurse to be present, as she is closest to them. That means you." Claire felt her stomach drop. "I am to attend?" she asked. "In the Golden Hall?" "Yes," Madame Besson said. "You will stand at the back. You will keep your head bowed. You will speak only if directly addressed. It is an honor to be included. Do not turn it into a disaster." "I do not intend to," Claire murmured. "Then keep your thoughts to yourself," Madame Besson said. "You have eyes, yes, but you also have a tongue. Remember which is more useful to you at court." Afternoon came too quickly. The Golden Hall was unlike any place Claire had ever seen. She followed Madame Besson through a side entrance and stopped just inside the door, stunned for a moment by the wash of light. High windows let in a pale glow. Mirrors lined the walls, catching and multiplying it until the room seemed full of shifting brightness. There were gilded moldings, crystal chandeliers, polished floors, but what struck her most was not the beauty. It was the faces. Nobles in silk and lace filled the space, arranged in careful clusters. They spoke in low voices, glancing toward the raised dais at the far end where a single empty chair waited. Servants moved along the walls like shadows. Guards stood near the doors. Madame Besson led Claire to a spot near the back, almost behind a heavy column. "You stay here," she said. "Do not fidget. Do not stare." Claire nodded, but her eyes were already drawn to the cluster near the dais. Monsieur Valcourt stood there, flanked by 2 other physicians. Duchess Helene stood not far away, her gown a smooth sweep of deep blue this time, her hair a perfect arrangement of shining coils. She spoke to a man in a dark coat, an advisor perhaps, and laughed softly at something he said. Then the murmurs quieted. A subtle ripple moved through the hall. The king entered. He did not wear a crown or heavy ceremonial robe, only a dark coat and the faintest hint of embroidery. Still, the air seemed to pull toward him as he walked to his chair. He glanced once across the room, taking in the gathered faces. Claire thought absurdly that he looked even more tired here than in the nursery. He seated himself. A court official stepped forward and raised his voice. "His Majesty will hear the report of the physicians regarding the condition of His Highness Prince Henri and Her Highness Princess Elise." Monsieur Valcourt moved to the center of the hall. He bowed deeply, then turned to face the assembly. "Your Majesty, ladies and gentlemen of the court," he began, "the condition of the royal heirs continues to trouble all hearts. Their illness is of a rare and complex nature. We have spared no effort in pursuing remedies worthy of their rank. Thanks to the generosity of His Majesty and of certain noble benefactors." His eyes flicked briefly toward Duchess Helene. We have obtained rare essences and treatments from distant cities. Murmurs of approval rose, then faded. Claire shifted her weight, listening. While progress has been slower than we had hoped, Valcor continued, we have observed that the children rest more quietly under the influence of our most refined remedies. Their suffering is eased, their minds are calmed. This gives their bodies more strength to battle the deeper cause of their illness, which we continue to study with diligence. The king raised a hand. Slow progress is still progress, he said. Yet my children remain thin and weary. Their laughter is rare. Tell me plainly, Valcor, do you still believe your methods will succeed? Valcor bowed his head. I do, sire, he said. But we must be patient. The body is a complex instrument. These things cannot be rushed without risk. A courtier near Claire murmured, we spend fortunes on patience. Another answered, better patience than despair. The king's gaze moved over the hall. You have all seen my children carried through these corridors, he said. You have seen their pale faces. I will do anything to restore them. I have not hesitated to open the treasury for any treatment that promises even a sliver of hope. I have allowed our physicians to try every method they deem safe. But I will also hear any voice that has seen something we have not. He looked toward the back of the hall. Claire felt the weight of his attention like a hand on her shoulder. Their nurse is here, he said. She watches them day and night. Mademoiselle Claire Moreau stepped forward. Her breath caught. Madame Besson's fingers brushed her arm in a quick warning, but there was no way to refuse. She stepped out from behind the column and walked down the long hall. Each step echoed louder than it should have. Faces turned, murmurs swelled. A maid? A peasant girl? What is His Majesty doing? She kept her eyes on the floor until she reached a point a few paces from the dais, then curtsied deeply. Raise your head, mademoiselle, the king said. She obeyed. The hall swam slightly before her, then steadied. You are with my children more than anyone, he said. You see them at all hours. Tell me, do you believe they grow better or worse? Her heart pounded. She could feel Valcor's stare on her like a blade. She took a breath. Your Majesty, she said, I am not a physician. I cannot speak of causes as they do, but I can say what I have seen. Then say it, the king replied. She swallowed once. They are weaker than when I first arrived, she said. They sleep more, but their sleep is heavy, like a deep fog. On days when there are fewer visitors, when the room is aired and the remedies are simple, they seem a little more themselves. They ask more questions, they smile. On days when many people come, when the scented cloths are used often, they grow quieter and more distant. The hall hummed with a new murmur. Valcor's jaw tightened. The scented cloths, the king repeated. You mean the essences? Yes, sire, she said, steadying her voice. There is one in particular, very sweet. Each time it is used, they become more drowsy, more far away. They do not complain of pain, but they also do not laugh. They say it makes them feel heavy and distant from themselves. Duchess Hélène's eyes flashed. Are you suggesting, Valcor said sharply, that the remedies we administer are harming them, that our efforts to ease their suffering are in fact prolonging it? I am saying, Claire answered, that when that essence is near, their weakness worsens. It may ease pain in the moment, but afterward, they are slower, less themselves. That is a very serious implication, Valcor said. Based on what? Your feelings? Your memories? The idle chatter of two children who dislike unpleasant scents? Claire's hands trembled, but she kept them folded. Based on watching them, she said. Every day, every hour. I do not wish to accuse anyone, but I fear something meant to help them may be hurting them instead. Duchess Hélène stepped forward slightly. This girl, she said, speaks of my gift, the comforting essence I provide from my own purse. Does she accuse me of harming my own niece and nephew? Eyes turned from Claire to the Duchess, then back again. Claire's throat tightened. I accuse no one, she said. I only say that when the essence is used, they suffer more afterward. Whoever brings it, whatever its origin, that is what I have seen. Valcor spread his hands. Sire, he said to the king, will you allow a village maid to slander the generosity of your own family and the skill of your physicians? She does not know the complexities of medicine. She sees only what her limited understanding permits. Children often worsen before they improve under treatment. She mistakes a necessary phase for harm. Shall we abandon our efforts every time a maid grows uneasy? Duchess Hélène's voice softened, but it carried clearly. "I can bear the insult," she said. "If my little ones are truly in danger from anything I provide, I wish to know it. But I must say it grieves me to see my attempts to help twisted into suspicion by someone who has been here mere days." The king looked at Claire. "Do you have proof?" he asked quietly. "Anything beyond your observations? Anything that cannot be explained by chance?" The word proof sat like a stone between them. Claire thought of the long nights, of Elise's whispered complaints, of Henri's frown when the scent spread. But she had no numbers, no powders, no wilted flowers to present. Only memory and fear. "No, Your Majesty," she said at last, her voice barely audible. "I have only what I have seen." Silence fell, deeper this time. A courtier near the front let out a soft, almost satisfied sigh. Another shook his head. Valcourt bowed again. "Sire," he said, "we cannot allow such baseless accusations to guide our course. It would put every established method at risk, subject to the whims of servants. The Duchess has been nothing but devoted in her concern. I ask that you protect her name from this girl's ignorance." The king rubbed his temples. "I asked for honesty," he said, "and she has given it. Perhaps too boldly, perhaps without understanding, but I do not doubt her intention." He looked at Claire again. "How you have caused a storm with your words," he said quietly. "Are you certain you wish to stand by them?" Her legs felt weak. Her cheeks burned. She knew that if she bowed now, if she apologized, if she said she had been mistaken, the moment would pass. Her life at court would be easier. No one would look at her as they did now. But she saw in her mind Henri's face when he whispered, "Not again," as the scented cloth approached. She heard Elise say, "It makes me feel far away." She lifted her chin a fraction. "I stand by what I have seen," she said. "Even if I am wrong, it would be worse not to speak." The murmurs rose to a low roar. "She defies the physicians. She questions the Duchess. How dare she?" Valcourt's expression hardened into something less controlled. "Sire," he said, "this insolence cannot go unanswered. If maids believe they can challenge the decisions of court and crown, your authority will erode from the bottom. I request that she be removed from the children's chamber at once. Her presence will only cause agitation and distrust." Duchess Hélène tilted her head. "I confess," she said softly, "I do not feel entirely at ease with someone who views my every gift with suspicion, caring for my niece and nephew. It would pain me to see their young minds filled with doubts about those who love them." The king remained silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was low. "Claire Moreau," he said, "I do not believe you meant harm. I believe you spoke from concern. But concern without knowledge can cause as much damage as neglect. You have cast a shadow over the work of those who have devoted their lives to healing. You have caused embarrassment in front of the court." She bowed her head. "I am sorry to have embarrassed you, sire," she whispered, "but I am not sorry to care." Tears burned behind her eyes, but she did not let them fall. The king's voice softened, though the words did not. "You will no longer serve in the children's chamber," he said. "You will be assigned to other duties within the palace. Perhaps distance will help you remember your place." The hall seemed to tilt slightly. Claire heard a few satisfied sighs, a murmur of approval. "However," the king continued, "you will not be dismissed entirely. I do not punish honest concern with exile. You will remain in service under Madame Besson. Do not attempt to approach the nursery without permission. Do you understand?" "Yes, Your Majesty," she said, her voice barely more than breath. "Go," he said. She curtsied, keeping her gaze low so no one would see the tears at the edges of her eyes. Then she turned and walked back down the long hall. No one spoke to her as she passed. She heard their whispers directed over her head, around her, like a cold wind. Foolish girl, too much courage, too little sense. Pensant that honesty is a virtue in a place like this. She reached the side door and slipped out, her hands numb. Madame Besson was waiting in the corridor, her expression unreadable. "Well," she said quietly, "you have done it now." Claire drew a shaky breath. "I told the truth," she said. "You embarrassed the king," Madame Besson replied, "and shamed the physicians. Truth can be spoken many ways. You chose the most dangerous." "I could not remain silent," Claire whispered. Madame Besson studied her for a moment. "No," she said, "I suppose you could not. Come, there is work to be done elsewhere. The palace does not stop because one maid's heart is bruised. The days that followed were a blur. Claire was moved to other tasks. She scrubbed floors in distant corridors. She polished banisters. She helped change linens in guest rooms. The work was not harder than tending the nursery, but it felt emptier. The absence of the children pressed on her like a physical weight. Sometimes, passing certain corridors, she heard faint echoes of their laughter from the early days. Sometimes she imagined she could smell the sweet, heavy scent of the essence, even where it could not be. She asked no one about Henri and Elise. No one offered information. News of the royal children travelled slowly to the lower servants, unless something dramatic occurred. One evening, as she scrubbed a stubborn stain near a back staircase, Luc approached with a bucket of water. "You have been gone from the nursery," he said in a low voice. "Yes," Claire replied. "My mother says the children are the same," he went on. "Not better, not worse, always tired, always quiet. She hears the kitchen maids whisper that the physicians argue more now. Some say they should try new remedies. Some say they must keep using the old ones." Claire pressed the brush harder against the floor. "Thank you for telling me," she said. He hesitated. "They ask for you," he added. "That is what one of the upstairs maids said. The princess asked where you had gone." Her hand stilled. "What did they say?" she asked. "That you were needed elsewhere," he answered. "And that she must not trouble herself about servants." Claire looked at the dull patch of stone before her. "I see," she murmured. That night, she lay awake on her narrow bed in the servants' quarters, staring at the low ceiling. The others slept around her, breathing softly. The faint sounds of the palace at rest drifted in, the creak of beams, the distant murmur of guards. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Elise's face in the dim nursery, solemn and pale. The next day and the next, the work continued. She moved like a shadow from corridor to staircase, always near something that needed cleaning, never near the one place she wanted to be. On the third afternoon, as she knelt to scrub a smudge near the door of a seldom-used passage close to the nursery wing, something slid under the door beside her. A thin piece of folded parchment. She stared at it, then looked up and down the corridor. No one was there. Her hand shook a little as she picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting inside was small and careful, the letters just a little uneven, as if the writer had been taught to be neat but could not quite keep the strokes from wavering. "Claire," it read, "please come back. It hurts when they make us breathe it. They told us not to say anything." There was no signature, there did not need to be one. She knew Elise's hand already from the little notes the girl sometimes scribbled when she was too tired to speak much. Claire's heart slammed against her ribs. She read the words again, then pressed the parchment against her chest. For a moment, everything around her faded, the grey walls, the worn floor, the distant sounds. The children did not merely dislike the essence, they feared it, and someone had told them to keep silent. She folded the note carefully and slipped it into her apron. Her mind raced. If she went near the nursery, she would break the king's order. If she stayed away, she would leave the children alone with whatever was making them suffer. The wood of the door beside her creaked slightly, as if stirred by some draught. She stared at it, torn between fear and the desperate urge to push it open. As she knelt there, heart pounding, clutching the note, she heard footsteps in the corridor. Someone was approaching the door from the other side. The handle turned, and the door opened just enough for a thin line of light to cut across the floor. Claire scrambled back on her knees, brush still in one hand, trying to look as if she had simply been cleaning. Her heart pounded so loudly she could hardly hear anything else. A young man stepped through the narrow opening, closing the door softly behind him. He carried a leather case, not a servant's bucket. His coat was plain but clean, his dark hair a little disordered, as if he had run a hand through it too often. Claire recognized him. She had seen him many times in the nursery, standing a little behind Monsieur Valcourt, watching more than speaking. "Forgive me," he said in a low voice when he saw her. "I did not expect anyone to be here." "I was told to scrub this passage," she answered quickly. "If I am in the way, I can move." "No," he said. "You are not in the way. This door is rarely used." He shifted his case from one hand to the other. His gaze dropped to the edge of the parchment, peeking from her apron. "That paper," he said quietly. "It came from inside?" Her fingers closed over the note. "It was slid under the door," she said. "I do not know by whom." He looked at her, then at the door, then back again. "I am Julien Armand," he said, "assistant to Monsieur Valcourt. I have been sent to bring a tincture to the nursery." "I have seen you," she replied. "You stand at the back." "It is where one stands when one's opinion is not requested," he said with a faint, self-mocking smile. "May I ask, does that note concern the children?" His question was simple, but the way he asked it held something else, an urgency, a careful concern that did not feel like idle curiosity. Claire hesitated, then unfolded the paper and held it so he could read without taking it from her hand. His eyes skimmed the words. His jaw tightened. "They told us not to say anything," he repeated softly. "That troubles me more than the rest." "It is Elise's writing," Claire said. "She says it hurts when they make them breathe it. I cannot ignore this. I tried to speak once. You may have heard what happened." "I did," he said. All the palace heard. Some laughed, some shook their heads. "I did neither." "You believe me?" she asked. He met her gaze. "I believe that a person who has nothing to gain and much to lose by speaking is rarely lying," he said. "And I have eyes as well. I have seen that the children's worst heaviness follows certain treatments." "The essence," Claire said. "Yes," he answered, "though I have never been invited to say so." He glanced at the door again. "I must go in," he said. "If I delay, they will ask questions. But perhaps there is a way for us to watch more closely without calling down the wrath of the entire court." "You are a physician," she said. "You can speak. I am only a maid." "I am an assistant," he corrected. "That is another way of saying I am listened to when convenient and ignored when I am not. We are not so different, Mademoiselle Claire." Her name in his voice startled her. Few here used it without adding girl or maid beside it. "What do you propose?" she asked. He looked down the empty corridor, then back at her. "Wait for me here," he said. "If anyone asks, you are still scrubbing. When I return, we shall talk, if you wish." He did not press. He simply left the offer hanging, like a hand held out. She nodded once. He slipped through the door, closing it behind him. Claire heard muted voices on the other side, then footsteps moving away from the threshold. She scrubbed the already clean stone for show, her ears straining for every sound. Minutes dragged. The corridor remained empty. At last the door opened again. Julien emerged, closing it gently. "They are resting," he said, "if one can call that heavy stillness rest." "They used it again?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "The Duchess visited an hour ago. She insisted upon it. When I entered, the room still smelled sweet enough to make my head ache." His expression tightened. "I took a small amount," he added in a whisper, tapping his case. "I pretended to prepare an auxiliary remedy. Valcourt barely noticed. He rarely does, as long as I stand where he expects me to stand." "You have the essence?" Claire asked. "A sample," he said. "Enough to study, perhaps." He glanced up and down the corridor again. "There is an unused pantry near the back stairs," he said. "No one goes there at this hour. Will you come?" "If I am found," she began. "If we are found," he corrected. "You are not alone in this. That is the point." Something in his tone cut through her fear. She nodded. They moved quickly, not quite running, but walking with a purpose that might be mistaken for errands if anyone looked. No one did. Servants had their own concerns, and nobles rarely glanced at plain coats and aprons. The pantry was small and dark, smelling faintly of old flour and dry wood. Julien shut the door behind them and set his case on a narrow table. He opened it and drew out a tiny glass vial, no larger than the Duchess's but clearly of another origin. The liquid inside gleamed softly. "This," he said, "is the Duchess's gift." He also took out a small folded cloth and a softer-looking vial of plain water. "I have no laboratory," he said. "Only my hands and a few simple tools, but sometimes that is enough." "What will you do?" Claire asked. "First, we shall trust senses that apparently count for nothing at court," he said lightly. "Sight, smell, simple observation." He uncorked the vial cautiously, then dampened a corner of the cloth with a single drop. The perfume unfurled, sweet and heavy, filling the small space at once. Claire's head swam. She took an involuntary step back. "It is stronger in here," she murmured. "Yes," he said. "The room is small. Now smell this." He handed her the second vial. It contained only water and a trace of mint. The scent was sharp, but clean. "Better," she said. "Indeed," he murmured. "Now, watch." From his case he produced something that surprised her, a small clay pot containing a plant with delicate white flowers. "You bring flowers to a pantry?" she asked. "I bring them wherever I can," he said with a quick smile. "They are easier to read than people. This one has been watered and kept in the same place for a week. It is healthy." He placed the pot on the table. Then he set the cloth with the scented drop close to the flowers, not touching them, but letting the perfume drift over them. "We shall leave this for a time," he said, "and we shall do nothing dramatic. We shall simply watch." They waited. At first, nothing happened. The flowers were just flowers. The scent wrapped around them, clinging. Julian watched, his brows drawn slightly. "Perhaps I am foolish," he said quietly. "Perhaps we are both chasing shadows. Or perhaps shadows have substance," Claire replied. He glanced at her, almost startled, then smiled faintly. "You speak like someone who has spent too much time in a sick room," he said. "There is little difference between fear and hope there." "Enough difference to matter," she said. "Fear keeps you awake. Hope keeps you standing. Both seem to keep you talking in ways you ought not," he said, but there was no rebuke in it. They stood in silence for a few more minutes. Then Claire leaned closer. "Look," she whispered. The edges of the white petals were not as crisp. They had begun to droop ever so slightly. The flowers looked as though a long day had passed in the space of a quarter hour. "It could be coincidence," Julian said. "Plants do tire, but combined with what the children describe—" He carefully moved the cloth away, opening the second vial and waving the fresh scent near the flowers. "Let us see if they revive," he murmured. Another few minutes passed. The petals did not spring back. They remained wilted a little more each time Claire looked. Her chest tightened. "Is it poison?" she asked. "Not in the way you imagine," he said. "I have seen stronger substances that blacken leaves in moments. This is subtle. It dulls. It weighs down. In small quantities it might truly calm nervous patients, but in such fragile children used so often, it steals their strength," she finished for him. "Yes," he said, "bit by bit, day after day." He folded the scented cloth, making sure not to touch the damp corner with his fingers, and slid it into a small glass jar. "It is only one test," he said, "and not a perfect one. I would need to examine the liquid more, but I already know enough to be uneasy." "So why does Monsieur Valcourt not see this?" Claire asked. "He is trained. He has studied." "Because the substance does what he promises it will," Julian replied. "It calms, it quiets. It makes the children easier to handle, easier to present to the king as resting. It gives the illusion of control. It also creates dependency. When they try to reduce its use, the children are restless, and he can say, 'See, they need more.'" "And the Duchess?" Claire asked. He hesitated. "Her motive may be less simple," he said. "She is related to a merchant in Lyon who deals in rare essences. I have seen the orders. They are large. The palace pays, her family profits, and while the king pours silver into bottles, he has less to pour into other things. Alliances, reforms that might change the balance of power." Claire stared at him. "You think she wishes the children to remain ill?" she whispered. "I think she does not mind if their recovery takes a very long time," he said quietly. "While they are weak, she is strong. The court listens to those who stand nearest to suffering. She has placed herself there very carefully." He closed his case. "You must tell His Majesty," she said. "You have more than I had. You have tests. You have records. Records that might disappear the moment I mention them," he answered. "And tests performed with a flower in a pantry. The court will laugh at such simplicity." "The king is not the court," she insisted. "No," he said. "He is more weary than they are." He looked at her, thinking. "If we go to him together," he went on, "with what we have, we may be dismissed as reckless. But if we do nothing, the children will continue to fade. I cannot live comfortably with that." "Nor can I," she said. He opened the door a fraction and listened. "The corridor is clear," he murmured. "You should return to your assigned work. I will go back to the infirmary, but we must continue to watch. The next time the essence is used, I shall mark the hour, the amount, the children's state before and after. You must keep your own notes, even if only in your mind." "I remember everything," she said. "I have no doubt," he replied. They slipped back into the main passage and went their separate ways. The days that followed were a careful dance. Claire continued her dull round of chores, but she found reasons to be near the nursery wing whenever she could, carrying linens, delivering water, sweeping stairwells. She kept her eyes down and her ears open. Julian, for his part, moved between the infirmary and the royal chambers, always a step behind Valcour, always ready with a basin or a bandage. Once, as he passed Claire in a corridor, he murmured, "3 drops at noon, children drowsy by 1, breathing heavy by 2. Another time he whispered, "No essence for half a day, more questions from Henri. Elise asked me about the stars." Whenever they could, they met for a few minutes in the little pantry. Julian brought tiny notes, hastily scribbled on scraps, with times and observations. Claire read them and added what she had seen from afar: the droop of shoulders when certain visitors left, the way guards shifted when the Duchess approached, always at the same hour, always with the same little reticule at her wrist. "Does anyone else see this?" she asked one evening. "Some suspect something is wrong," he said, "but suspicion is not fashionable unless it is directed at the right people. It is easy to accuse a peasant of stealing bread. It is harder to accuse a duchess of selling poison disguised as kindness." The word poison made her flinch. "I do not know if it is poison by design," he added quickly. "Perhaps she truly believes in its virtues. Perhaps profit and vanity blind her to harm. But the effect upon the children is the same." Little by little, a picture formed in Claire's mind. A palace where money flowed toward bottles, where pain was quieted with scents that stole strength, where a woman in pearls stood at the edge of every sickbed, smiling while others weakened. "Why do you stay?" she asked Julian once. "If you see so much wrong, why do you remain here under Valcour?" He looked down at his ink-stained fingers. "Because leaving would change nothing," he said. "And because here I can at least try to tilt the scale a little. Besides, there are debts. My training was paid by others. They expected a return. Life is rarely as simple as walking away, nor as simple as staying," she said. He smiled briefly. "No," he agreed. "Nor that." Their shared secret drew them closer in a way that had nothing to do with grand gestures. It took shape in half-finished sentences, in glances exchanged across crowded rooms, in the relief of finding someone who saw the same shadows on the wall. One afternoon, when the sky outside the high windows was a flat, stubborn grey, a new idea came to Claire. "Elise wrote that note," she said to Julian in the pantry. "If she dared that, she may dare more. The children are the ones who feel the essence most. They may notice details we overlook. We must speak to them directly. If we are seen with them too often, questions will come," he cautioned. "I am already only a cleaner in their story," she said. "No one expects me to think. I can slip in when others do not bother to look." He hesitated. "Valcour would be furious," he said. "He already resents you." "I am already lost in his eyes," she replied. "Another step will not change that." He looked at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Very well," he said. "We shall be cautious. I will try to be present when you speak to them. 2 pairs of ears are better than 1, and if I stand near with a notebook, everyone will assume I am simply checking their pulses again." That evening, when the physicians had finished their rounds and the Duchess had not visited, a small mercy, the nursery lay quiet except for the crackle of a low fire. Claire approached the door with a basin and cloths in her hands. The guard at the end of the corridor barely glanced at her. "I am to change the water in their Highnesses' room," she said with calm she did not feel. The guard waved her through. Inside, the twins lay awake but still. Henri stared at the ceiling. Elise held a small doll, its dress carefully mended. "Claire," she breathed when she saw her. "You have come." Henri's eyes flicked toward the door. "Are you allowed to be here?" he asked. "No," she said, "but I am here anyway." He gave a weak half-smile at that. Julian entered a moment later, carrying his case. "Good evening, Your Highnesses," he said. "I am merely here to ask dull questions and write dull notes. You may ignore me entirely." He moved to the far side of the room and opened his notebook, glancing occasionally toward the door to be sure no one else was approaching. Claire set the basin down and began to change the water in their cups, slowly, buying time. "I received your note," she said softly to Elise. "I keep it with me." Elise's fingers tightened on the doll. "I was afraid it did not reach you," she whispered. I had to wait until the old nurse fell asleep. Henri kept watch. I pushed it under the crack myself. You were very brave, Claire said. It did not feel brave, Elise replied. Only necessary. Henri shifted, wincing. You said in the note that it hurts when they make you breathe it, Claire said. Can you tell me more? What do you feel exactly? Henri closed his eyes. At first it is only the smell, he said. Sweet and thick, it makes my eyes sting. Then my head grows heavy as if someone has placed a stone on it. My arms and legs feel far away. I hear people talking, but it sounds like they are underwater. After a while there is nothing, just the feeling that it would be easier not to try to move. It is like falling asleep while standing, Elise added. Only without dreams. Do you feel less pain? Julian asked from his corner, not looking up from his notes so that it would seem like routine questioning. Sometimes, Elise said, but I also feel less myself. Who told you not to complain? Claire asked gently. The twins exchanged a glance. The old nurse, Henri said. She said it was ungrateful to complain about gifts. She also said the Duchess would be very hurt if she knew we disliked her scent. And the physicians said we must not speak of remedies. They are not for children to discuss. Did the Duchess ever ask how it made you feel? Claire asked. No, Elise whispered. She only says we look pale and that the essence will make us calm for our father. Her small mouth twisted. I do not wish to be calm for my father, she added. I wish to be well for him. Claire's throat tightened. So do we, she said. All of us here who truly care. Julian cleared his throat. May I ask, he said, whether there are days when you feel almost well? Yes, Henri answered. On mornings when no one comes for a long time, when the windows are open and the room does not smell of smoke or flowers. Sometimes on those days we pretend we are in the country. We remember the time Father took us to the lake. Those days feel almost normal. Do those days ever follow a day without the essence? Julian asked. Both children thought. Yes, Elise said slowly. Usually, but they are rare now. Julian wrote quickly. Thank you, Highnesses, he said. These details help more than you know. He snapped his notebook shut and turned to the door. I must not linger, he said. If Valcour comes and finds me here without him, he will ask questions. I will return tomorrow. He bowed and left, taking his case and his notes with him. Claire stayed a moment longer, smoothing Elise's blanket, straightening Henri's pillow. We are going to try to help you, she whispered. We will not stop even if others tell us to be quiet. You already tried, Henri said, and they took you away. They moved my hands, she answered. Not my thoughts. Elise's eyes shone. Do not let them move those, she said. I will not, Claire promised. She left the room before the guard could suspect she had been there too long. As she stepped into the corridor, her mind raced. They had more now. The children's words, the wilted flowers, the timing of the essence and the weakness, the records Julian had seen. It was not a perfect chain, but it was more than a single maid's unease. That night in the pantry, they laid everything out like pieces on a board. We must go to the king, Claire said. Soon, before it is too late. I know, Julian replied. But if we go with nothing more than this, Valcour will say we misinterpreted, that the children are fanciful, that the plant was already weak, that the records are merely proof of generosity. He will twist every fact until it points away from him and the Duchess. Then what more can we find, she asked. He stared at the wall, thinking. If I could obtain a larger portion of the essence, he said slowly, and if I could compare it with known sedatives, but it would take time, and access I do not yet have. A thought sparked in Claire's mind. The Duchess always brings her own vial, she said, but sometimes she leaves it behind. Once, she left it on the table in the nursery. I saw it myself. And Valcour caught you holding it, Julian reminded her. Yes, she said, but if he had not come so quickly, I could have hidden it. I still could, if the chance came again. That would be theft from a duchess, he said. If we were discovered, we would be dismissed at best. At worst, I do not know. Public disgrace, possibly charges. The law does not smile upon those who meddle with medicines meant for royalty. Do you have a better idea? She asked. He did not answer immediately. No, he said at last. I do not. They looked at each other. We cannot hope for the perfect moment, Claire said. Only for a small opening. And when it comes, we must be ready. "That is a dangerous way to live," he said. "I have been living it since I first walked into the nursery," she replied. In the days that followed, Claire's senses sharpened. Every time she heard the distant sound of the Duchess's carriage, her heart leaped. Every time a servant mentioned the Golden Hall, or the king's visits or any gathering of physicians, her mind jumped ahead, trying to see whether an opportunity might be hidden within it. At last, it came. One afternoon the palace was thrown into mild confusion by the arrival of a foreign envoy. Courtiers drifted toward the reception rooms. Even some of the physicians were summoned to stand in the background as symbols of the kingdom's learning. Duchess Helene insisted on visiting the twins just before the reception to assure herself they were presentable in their frailty, as she put it. Claire was sent with fresh linens under her arm to the nursery. The guard let her pass. Inside, she found the Duchess already there, the sweet perfume already thick in the air. "You are here," the Duchess said without much interest. "Good. Change the cloth on the washstand." "It offends me," Claire obeyed. From the corner of her eye she saw the familiar movement. The Duchess drawing the vial from her reticule, uncorking it, sprinkling drops onto a cloth. "Breathe, my dear ones," Helene cooed. "You will be so peaceful while I charm our guests. They must see that our kingdom is serene even in its trials." She lingered a little, smoothing Elise's hair, adjusting Henri's blanket. Then a lady-in-waiting entered in a hurry. "Your Grace," she said, "the envoy has arrived earlier than expected. The protocol master begs you to come at once." The Duchess's eyes flashed with annoyance. "Always haste," she said. "Children, I will return later. Do not trouble your father with complaints. He has guests to impress." She swept toward the door, reticule swinging lightly at her wrist. "Your Grace," Claire said carefully, "shall I bring your essence after you? You have left it—" "No, no," the Duchess said impatiently, already half through the doorway. "Leave it. I may return here before the evening is done. Do not touch it. I will know if you do." She disappeared with her ladies. The door closed. The vial stood on the small table between the beds. The scent rose from the damp cloth in the Duchess's wake. Claire heard her own heartbeat. She looked at Henri. His eyes were half closed, his lashes heavy. Elise's fingers twitched on the blanket. "It is strong," Henri whispered. "I know," Claire said. She crossed to the window and opened it a little, letting fresh air in as she had done before. Then she turned back to the vial. Her hand hovered above it. "This is our chance," she murmured, more to herself than to the children. "I must take it." She picked up the vial. Its glass felt warm from the Duchess's hand. The liquid inside slid against the sides, glinting. Very carefully, she poured a small amount into a tiny empty bottle she had hidden in her apron pocket earlier that day, just in case. Her hands did not shake now. They were too focused. She stoppered the little bottle and slipped it back into her apron. Then she set the Duchess's vial down exactly where it had been, with the same amount missing as might be lost to an accidental spill or careless drop. The children watched her through heavy eyes. "You must not tell anyone," she said softly. "Not yet. We are trying to help you." Elise's lips barely moved. "I know," she whispered. Footsteps sounded in the corridor. Claire jumped, but it was only a maid bringing clean towels. She finished changing the cloth, closed the window to avoid questions, and left the room with the towels in her arms and the stolen sample against her side. In the pantry, she poured the liquid into Julian's waiting vial. "You truly did it," he said, almost in disbelief. "There was no other way," she said. "Now you have enough to test more carefully." He nodded, jaw set. "I will work with this tonight," he said. "I will compare it with opiates, with other sedatives. I will write everything I find. Soon we must go to the king, Claire. We cannot delay any longer." "I know," she answered. "We will go together." That night he slipped her a folded page through the servants' dining room door. She read it in her narrow bed by candlelight. "High concentration of sedative elements," it said. "Strong cumulative effect. Clears slowly from the body. In adults potentially manageable. In children dangerous over time. Not immediate poison, but theft of vigor. Worsens natural fatigue. Encourages dependency. In my professional judgment, excessive use is harmful." At the bottom he had written, almost as an afterthought, "We must speak to His Majesty tomorrow. No more waiting." Her hands trembled as she folded the paper and pressed it against Elise's note. Two small voices, one childish, one trained, saying the same thing in different words. The next morning dawned pale and cold. They agreed to meet outside the nursery at mid-afternoon, when Valcour would be occupied with other patients in the infirmary, and the king was expected to visit the twins. It was, perhaps, their only chance to speak to him in a quiet room, away from the crowd of courtiers. Claire arrived first, carrying a stack of folded linens. The guard nodded and let her pass. Inside, the children lay awake, less dull than on some days. The essence had not been used since the previous afternoon. "You look a little better," she said softly. "It is easier to think today," Henri replied. "Not easy, but easier." Elise smiled faintly. "I dreamed last night," she said. "Not about the ceilings, about the lake." Claire's heart warmed. "Hold on to that," she said. "We may soon be able to give you more days like this." She heard footsteps in the corridor. Julien entered, his case in hand. "Your Highnesses," he said, bowing, "may I check your pulses? And perhaps trouble your father for a private word when he arrives." "Will you tell him?" Henri asked. "Yes," Claire said. "We will tell him everything." Time stretched. The king was late. The air in the nursery felt thick, not with perfume this time, but with waiting. The children dozed and woke and dozed again. Claire smoothed blankets. Julien paced lightly, pretending to arrange bottles. At last the door opened, but it was not the king. Duchess Hélène swept in, her gown a deep shade of green today, her reticule gleaming at her wrist. Two ladies followed. Behind them, to Claire's dismay, came Monsieur Valcour. "I was told my brother would be here," the Duchess said, glancing around. "It seems I was misinformed." "No matter. I wish to see the children regardless." She moved toward the beds, then stopped. Her eyes had fallen upon the small table. On it lay Julien's notebook, left open for a moment while he had turned to fetch a clean quill. Beside it, in unfortunate clarity, rested a glass vial containing a portion of the familiar golden essence, Julien's sample, brought here as part of his plan to show the king. Near the vial, on the edge of the table, were several sheets of childish drawings that Elise had made. A woman in a long gown, surrounded by swirling dark lines, and two small figures lying in bed beneath them. For a moment, the room froze. Then the Duchess's gaze lifted, cold and sharp, and settled on Claire. Her voice, when it came, was clear enough to cut stone. "Guards," she called, "come at once. This girl is tampering with the remedies of the royal children. She conspires to harm the heirs of France." The room exploded into chaos. The twins flinched at the Duchess's cry. Claire's breath caught in her throat. Julien froze, his hand half extended toward the notebook. Valcour turned at once, his eyes locking onto the vial and the open pages. Two guards appeared in the doorway, startled but ready. They took in the scene, the Duchess pointing, the maid standing too close to the royal beds, the physician's assistant, rigid with shock. Duchess Hélène's voice rang out again, clear and cold. "Arrest her," she commanded. "She has been meddling with the medicines meant for the prince and princess. Who knows what she has done? The heirs could be in danger at this very moment." "Wait," Julien said sharply. "Your Grace, that is not—" Valcour stepped forward, seizing the moment. "Your Grace is right to be alarmed," he said. "Sire's children have been entrusted to our care, and now we find unauthorized substances and scribbled speculations beside their beds. This is not the place for experiments from maids and assistants." He looked at Claire, his expression severe. "I warned you once about interfering," he said. "You did not listen." Claire lifted her chin. "I have done nothing to harm them," she said. "Everything I have done was to understand what harms them already." "Silence!" Hélène snapped. "You will not twist your crimes into virtue." Henri pushed himself up on his elbows, his voice breaking. "She did not hurt us," he said. "She helps us. She listens." Elise clutched her doll, her eyes wide with fear. "It hurts when they make us breathe it," she whispered. "Claire is the only one who believes us." The Duchess's jaw tightened. "The children are confused," she said. "They are weak. They cannot be expected to understand what is done for their good." Julien took a step closer to the guards. "If anyone is to be questioned about that vial, it is I," he said. "I placed it there, not Claire." Valcour turned on him. "You admit tampering with remedies?" he said. "You admit using royal children for your own experiments?" "No," Julien said firmly. I removed a portion of the essence to examine its effects because I feared its overuse. I have done nothing that increased the children's risk. On the contrary, you questioned my methods in secret, Valcour cut in. You who were trained by my hand. Ungrateful boy. One may be grateful and still refuse to close one's eyes, Julian replied. The two things are not enemies. Hélène's gaze flicked between them, then returned to Claire. Claire felt it like a hand closing around her throat. The king will decide, the Duchess said. We shall not argue here. Guard, take that girl to a secure room. She is not to go near the children until His Majesty has heard this. The nearer guard stepped forward. Mademoiselle, he said, his tone not unkind, you must come with me. Henri's voice shook. No, he said, you cannot take her. She has done nothing wrong. Your Highness, the guard said gently, we must obey orders. No harm will come to her without cause. Claire moved toward the bed. It is all right, she said softly to the twins. Look at me. It is all right. I will speak. I will tell the truth. Do not be afraid. Elise reached for her hand, clinging to it for a moment. They will not listen, Elise whispered. They never listen. They will, Claire said, more to convince herself than anyone. Or they will at least hear. The guard touched her elbow. She let go of Elise's fingers and straightened. I will go, she said, but I ask one thing. Everyone looked at her. Bring the note, she said, the one the princess wrote, and let Master Julian bring his observations. If I am to be judged, let all my supposed crimes be seen. Valcour scoffed. You presume to request terms, he said, but Hélène, after a moment, nodded. Bring whatever pieces of scrap you wish, she said lightly. It will only prove how ridiculous this is. His Majesty is not swayed by childish scribbles. Julian snapped his notebook shut and picked it up. Claire slid her hand into her apron and closed her fingers around Elise's note. I am ready, she said. They led her through quieter corridors away from the eyes of the court. The guard did not grip her harshly. He walked beside her, as though escorting someone simply summoned rather than condemned. Still, each step felt heavy, like walking toward a cliff. At last they stopped before a door she had never passed. The guard knocked once. A voice from within said, Enter. The room on the other side was modest compared to the Golden Hall, yet it held more weight. Heavy drapes muffled outside sounds. A table stood near the window, papers neatly arranged. On one side of the room, a low fire burned in a small hearth. King Louis stood near the table, not in formal coat but in a plain dark one, his hair slightly disordered as if he had run a hand through it many times. He looked up as they entered. Leave us, he told the guard. All of you, except those directly involved. Close the door. The guard bowed and stepped out, leaving Claire, Julian, Duchess Hélène, and Monsieur Valcour in the room with the king. Madame Besson stood against one wall, her hands clasped, summoned perhaps as a witness, perhaps as a measure of order. For a moment, no one spoke. The king's gaze moved from person to person. It rested longest on Claire. I am told, he said quietly, that there has been an incident in the nursery. Accusations of tampering with remedies. The Duchess claims someone has endangered my children. I will hear each of you. I will hear it calmly. And I will not repeat the chaos of the Golden Hall. His eyes met Claire's. You will speak when asked, he said, not unkindly. All of you. You will answer plainly. I am not a court today. I am a father. He turned first to Hélène. Begin, he said. What happened? Duchess Hélène inclined her head with careful humility. Brother, she said, I went to visit my niece and nephew, as I always do. I used the comforting essence I have so generously supplied, wishing to bring them ease. Later, when I returned with Monsieur Valcour, we found this. She gestured toward Julian's hand. He stepped forward and placed the vial on the table. At the king's nod, he also added his notebook, closed but ready. An unauthorized vial beside their beds, scribbled notes, drawings suggesting some sinister connection, and the maid we discussed before standing too close, clearly involved. It seemed obvious that she was meddling again in matters beyond her station. Valcour added, smoothing his coat. I can confirm, sire, that neither this arrangement nor these observations were approved by me. Any testing of remedies should be done under my direction, not secretly at the children's bedside. The king nodded once. And you, Claire Moreau? He asked. What do you say? She lifted her eyes to his. I say, Your Majesty, that I have done nothing to harm your children, she said. Everything I have done because I feared they were being harmed already. Explain, he said. She drew Elise's note from her apron and stepped forward, holding it out. This came under the door where I was cleaning, she said. Your daughter wrote it. She says so without signing it. The king took the paper and read the small lines. His jaw tightened. It hurts when they make us breathe it. They told us not to say anything. He read aloud. Helene lifted her chin. They are children, she said. Children often dislike what is good for them. How many children complain about bitter medicines? I did not know they were so frightened by the scent. Had I known, I would have— You would have what? The king asked sharply. Stopped? Or told them again not to trouble the adults? Her mouth snapped shut. Claire spoke softly. When I was still allowed in the nursery, she said, I saw a pattern. On days when the essence is used often, the children fall into a heavier sleep, but wake weaker. On days when it is not used or used less, they ask more questions. They remember more, they complain more, yes, but they also live more. She glanced at Julian. I spoke once, she said. I did not have proof. I was told my fears were foolish. Since then, I have watched. Julian has watched too. The king turned to Julian. And you, he asked. You are trained, a physician, even if still under instruction. What have you done? Julian's voice was calm, but there was a tightness to it. Your Majesty, he said, I noticed the same pattern Mademoiselle Claire describes. At first I told myself it was coincidence. No one wishes to believe that what he offers as help might be harm. But as days passed, I could not ignore it. He opened his notebook and turned a few pages. I took a small amount of the essence, he went on, and tested it in simple ways. No drastic experiments. I exposed a healthy plant to its scent. It wilted more quickly than its fellows. I compared the liquid with known sedatives. Its components are strong. Strong enough that in such small bodies used so frequently, it would dull not only pain, but vitality. He looked up. In my professional judgment, sire, the essence is harmful in the quantity and pattern it has been used. Not immediately fatal, but slowly draining. The children rely on it to rest. Their bodies forget how to settle without it. Valcour made an impatient sound. These are crude tests, he said. Plants and guesses. Where is your controlled study? Your measured dosages? You present half work as if it were a decree. The children cannot wait for the perfect study, Julian replied. They are not pages in a book. They are fading. The king's gaze flicked between them. You went behind my chief physician's back, he said to Julian. You, Claire, spoke in public against my sister-in-law and did so again in your heart. Why did neither of you come to me sooner as you are doing now? I was forbidden, Claire said simply. After the Golden Hall, you yourself told me I must not approach the nursery. I believed if I disobeyed again, I would be sent away entirely. I thought I might still be of some use nearby. Julian nodded. And I feared that if I came with partial evidence, Valcour would crush it before it reached you, he said. So I gathered more. Perhaps I waited too long. For that, I accept blame. Louis's eyes lingered on him. You accept blame, he repeated. That is rare in this palace. He turned back to Valcour. You are my chief physician, he said. You have had full authority over my children's treatment. Did you ever consider that the essence might be part of the problem? Valcour drew himself up. Sire, he said, this essence is used in many fine houses. It calms and soothes. The Duchess procured it from a reputable apothecary. The children's illness preceded its use. We believed and still believe that their condition is rooted deeper. We are not dealing with simple nerves. That is not an answer, the king said. Did you consider the possibility? Valcour hesitated just long enough. We observed that they rested more easily under its influence, he said. We saw no sign of immediate distress. It would be unreasonable to discard a helpful remedy on the word of a maid and a new assistant. Claire flinched at the words. Julian's jaw tightened. Madame Besson, silent until now, spoke in a low voice. Your Majesty, she said, I do not understand medicines, but I have seen with my own eyes that the children are quieter after the Duchess's visits and weaker the day after. I told myself that suffering often worsens before improving. Perhaps I wished to believe that. But the maid is not alone in her observation. The king's eyes darkened. He looked at Helene. And you, sister, he said. What is your part in this? Did you profit from supplying this essence? She stiffened. I have connections, she said carefully. Of course, we all do. My cousin in Lyon deals in such goods. When I heard of this essence, I thought immediately of the children. I ordered it at a reduced price, that is all. A reduced price, he repeated. The accounts show significant sums. The apothecary must be paid, she said, as must the merchants along the route. Brother, you know how these things work. I did not bring you poison. I brought you what many call a luxury. And when the children grew weaker, he asked, did you never wonder if your gift played a part? I trusted the physicians, she replied. If they said it helped, who was I to question them? I am not heartless. I have sat beside their beds too. I have watched them suffer. Yet you did not stop bringing it, the king said softly. You did not even reduce it. Hélène's composure cracked a little. You do not know what it is to sit by uselessly, she said, her voice shaking. To feel the court whisper that you are cold if you do not show enough concern. This essence gave me something to do. A way to say, look, I am helping. I did not want to think it might be harmful, because then you would have to admit you were part of the harm, Louis said. The words hung between them. Her eyes flashed. You will make me a villain now, she demanded. After all I have done to keep the court steady while you pace the corridors. I did not plan this. I did not sit in a dark room and say, let the children weaken. I only believed those who told me more remedy meant more hope. Claire watched, her heart beating hard. She did not see a monster in Hélène, only a woman whose vanity and fear had combined into something dangerous. Julian spoke quietly. Intentions matter, Your Majesty, he said, but so do results. The king closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were wet but clear. I will hear from one more source, he said, the only ones who know exactly how these remedies feel. Bring the children. Madame Besson started. Sire, are you certain? She asked. They are old enough to answer simple questions, he said, and I will not decide their future without hearing their voices. Madame Besson bowed and slipped from the room. A short while later, the door opened again. Two nurses guided Henri and Élise in, each walking slowly, wrapped in light robes. Their faces were pale, but their eyes were bright with curiosity and a flicker of fear. Father, Henri asked. Louis moved toward them at once, taking each by a hand. My darlings, he said softly, I am sorry to trouble you, but I must ask you some questions, and I need you to answer even if you think I will not like your words. Do you understand? Élise nodded, clutching his hand as if it were an anchor. Yes, father, she said. The king crouched a little to be at their level. The essence, he said. The sweet scent your aunt brings. How does it make you feel? Henri's gaze flicked to Hélène, then to Valcourt, then back to his father. They told us not to complain, he said. They said it was ungrateful. They said you needed us to be calm. I need you to be honest, Louis said. Now, more than anything. Speak freely. There will be no punishment for truth. Henri drew a breath. It makes my head heavy, he said. My arms, too. It is easier not to think, not to move. Sometimes that is good when everything hurts. But afterward, I feel emptied. Elise's voice was barely above a whisper. It makes me feel far away from myself, she said, as if I am watching from the ceiling. The day after, it is harder to sit up. When they do not use it, I hurt more, but I feel more real. I remember things better. The king swallowed. Why did you not tell me this? He asked. We tried, Élise said simply. But the nurse said not to trouble you, and the physician said children do not understand remedies, and Aunt Hélène said it would break her heart if she knew we disliked her gift. Hélène flinched. I thought you were being polite, she said, panic rising. I did not realize. Louis straightened slowly. Take them back to their room, he told the nurses, his voice rough. No more essence. No more of that scent. If anyone brings it near them again, by my word, they will leave this palace at once. He leaned down and kissed each child's forehead. I will fix this, he whispered. I promise you. The children clung to him for a moment, then let the nurses lead them out, their footsteps soft on the floor. Silence settled when the door closed behind them. The king stood very still. Claire could see his hands tremble. At least now there is no more doubt, Julian said softly. Louis turned to face them all. No, he said, No more doubt. He walked to the table where the vial lay and looked at it as if it were an enemy he had misjudged. I trusted you, he said to Valcour. I trusted your learning. I trusted your judgment. When I was too desperate to think clearly, you were supposed to think for me. Valcour drew himself up, pride mixing with defensiveness. I did what any physician of my standing would do, he said. I used the most advanced treatments available. I did not pour poison into their mouths. I sought to ease their suffering. You eased mine as well, the king replied sharply. You told me there was hope when perhaps there was only routine. You did not question yourself. That is what I cannot forgive. Valcour's jaw clenched. If you wish to dismiss me, sire, you may, he said stiffly, but you will not find another with my experience. The king's eyes were hard now. I am sure I will find many with your pride, he said. Pack your things, Monsieur Valcour. By tomorrow I want you gone from Versailles. You will not attend my children again. If you practice elsewhere, I pray your patients have more strength than my own. Valcour's face went chalk white. For a moment he looked as if he might protest. Then he bowed very slowly. As you wish, sire, he said. I hope you do not live to regret discarding those who serve you best. He turned and walked out, his steps stiff. The door closed behind him. Louis faced Hélène. As for you, he said quietly, you are my family. That makes this more painful, not less. I do not believe you set out to harm Henri and Élise, but you enjoyed the admiration, the role, the influence that came with your gifts. You did not ask enough questions about their cost. Her eyes filled with angry tears. What will you do, she asked. Banish me? Announce to the court that your own sister-in-law harmed the heirs? No, he said. I will not feed gossip more than it already feeds itself, but you will have no say in their treatment from this day forward. No more essences, no more remedies, no more visits without a nurse and a physician present to watch. That is not banishment, she said. No, he agreed. It is distance, and that distance will do us both good. He sighed. You will retire to your estate in the country for a time, he added. I will tell the court you go to recover from the strain of this long illness. You may return later when all this is only a memory, but near my children's beds your reign is over. Hélène's shoulders sagged. For a moment she looked smaller, not the flawless figure gliding through the golden hall, but a tired woman whose intricate game had slipped out of her control. As you command, she said, her voice brittle. I will have my things prepared. She bowed, more stiffly than gracefully, and left. The room felt larger once she was gone. Only Claire, Julien, Madame Besson, and the king remained. Louis exhaled slowly and turned to them. And now, he said, those who spoke when it would have been easier to stay silent. He stepped closer to Claire. When you accused the essence in front of the court, he said, I thought you were driven by fear and ignorance. Perhaps I wanted to believe that, because believing you would have meant admitting I had allowed harm. I understand, sire, she said softly. I never wished to shame you. You did more than shame me, he replied. You forced me to look at what I did not wish to see, and I punished you for it. He bowed his head slightly. For that, I ask your forgiveness, he said. Her breath caught. I am only a maid, she said. You do not need my forgiveness. I am a father, he answered. Of course I do. She swallowed hard. There is nothing to forgive, she said. You were desperate. I was clumsy. We both did what we knew how to do. He studied her face, then nodded. From this day, he said, you will not be only a maid. I name you governess to Prince Henri and Princess Élise. Not nurse, not temporary caretaker. Governess. You will see to their daily lives, their learning, their comfort. You have earned my trust more honestly than many born to far higher rank. Claire stared at him. Governess? She repeated. Your Majesty, I do not know if I am... You are, he said. How you may not know all the rules of court, but you know how to listen to my children. That is more important than knowing which spoon to use. Madame Besson gave a small, approving nod. She will grow into it, sire, she said. She has already grown into every task I have set her. Louis turned to Julien. And you, he said, you risked your position to test your suspicion. You could have kept your head down, waited to rise comfortably under Valcour, and left my children to their fate. You did not. It did not feel like a choice, Julien replied quietly. Once I saw what I saw, I could not pretend I had not. The king's mouth curved in a tired half-smile. I know that feeling, he said. It is a troublesome one. He placed a hand on Julian's shoulder. I appoint you personal physician to my children, he said. You will not serve alone. No one should hold such power alone again. I will bring another physician from outside the court to work beside you. Someone you respect, not someone who flatters. And you will answer to me, not to whoever shouts loudest at court. Julian's eyes widened. Sire, I am young, he said. There are others with more years. There are many with more years, Louis replied. Few with more humility. He squeezed Julian's shoulder lightly. Do not waste this chance, he said. If ever you see something that troubles you, you will come to me at once. I will listen, even if it is difficult. That is my promise. I will hold you to it, Julian said gently. Louis almost laughed. I expect you to, he said. Now go, both of you. Rest if you can. Tomorrow we begin again. Without perfume. He turned back to the window, his shoulders heavy but less hunched, as if some burden had shifted. Not vanished, but moved. Claire and Julian left the room together, Madame Besson following at a respectful distance. In the corridor, the air felt different. The tension that had wrapped around everything for weeks had not disappeared, but it no longer choked. Madame Besson touched Claire's arm. You took a dangerous path, she said. I did not believe you would come out of it whole. I am glad to be wrong. So am I, Claire whispered. The housekeeper inclined her head. Governess, she said, we will need to arrange your new room. You cannot remain in the servants' dormitory now. Come to me in the morning. Tonight you may still sleep where you are used to. It is not good to change every comfort at once. Thank you, Madame, Claire said. Madame Besson moved away, leaving Claire and Julian alone near a tall window that looked out onto the dim courtyard. For a moment neither spoke. Then Julian let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh and a sob together. I half expected to be sent back to my village with nothing but my bag, he said. Or worse, to be escorted there. So did I, Claire answered, at least about my own fate. He leaned against the stone beside the window. You were remarkably calm, he said. In that room, facing all of them. I could barely feel my fingers. I was not calm, she said. I just knew that if I let my fear speak, it would say all the wrong things. He studied her profile. You have done a great deal for those children, he said softly. More than any of us who wear coats with buttons. You have done no less, she replied. Without your notes, your tests, we would still be alone with our fears. He looked down at his hands. I was afraid to come forward at first, he admitted, not just because of Valcourt, because I worried I might be wrong, that I would ruin reputations for nothing. Reputations can heal, she said. Lives cannot. He smiled, a small tired curve of his lips. You always speak more simply than I do, he said, and more clearly. She shrugged lightly. I grew up with people who did not have time for long speeches, she said. If you wished to be heard, you had to say things quickly, before the bread burned. He laughed, a sound that loosened something in the air. Outside, the first trace of dawn colored the sky with the faintest grey blue. The torches in the courtyard guttered, fighting the coming light. Look, Claire said softly. Morning is coming. It always does in the end, Julian replied. Some nights are simply longer than others. They stood side by side for a moment, not touching, their shoulders close enough that the warmth of one seemed to reach the other. I will go to the nursery early, she said. They should wake to familiar faces, not new arrangements. I will join you, he answered. We can begin to undo what has been done. She nodded. We will try, she said. Together, he glanced at her, and there was something new in his eyes, something quiet, steady, not sudden, but built over shared fear and fragile hope. Together, he agreed. They parted in the corridor, each walking toward a different wing of the palace, carrying the same promise in their steps. Spring crept into Versailles so quietly that most of the court noticed it only when the ladies began to complain about the light showing every crease in their gowns. Claire noticed it first in the nursery. One morning, weeks after the essence had been banished and Valcourt sent away, she opened the window and realized the air no longer stung with cold. It felt softer, kinder. Henri was already sitting up in bed, his hair ruffled in every direction. Look, he said, pointing at the glass. There is no frost. Elise sat cross-legged on the other bed, comb in hand, trying to arrange her doll's hair. And look, she added, I am sitting without 3 pillows behind me. Claire smiled. Soon I shall have to chase you both through corridors instead of tucking you in, she said. Henri's eyes gleamed. For you say that as if it were a burden, he answered. It will be, she replied, a delightful, exhausting burden. Julian arrived a moment later, physician's case in hand, coat a little crooked as usual from haste. Good morning, Highnesses, he said. Claire, how are our patients? Restless, Henri declared. Which means we are better. Restless is my favorite symptom, Julian said. Hold out your hand. He checked their pulses, peered at their eyes, asked his usual round of questions. Any strange dreams? He asked Elise. Only about riding a horse, she said. Does that count as strange? Not at all, he replied. It sounds like an ambition. And you, Henri, any more of that floating feeling? Not for days, Henri said. Only the normal floating when I do not wish to listen to studying. Claire raised a brow. That is not floating, she said. That is selective hearing, a common condition in princes and peasants. Julian laughed softly. It does not require treatment, he said. Only patience, which you seem to have. She gave him a look. Some days more than others. They moved together through the small ritual of the morning, choosing clothes, washing faces, deciding which lessons to begin with. Reading, arithmetic, history, a walk later if the weather held. As the children argued over whether the tale of a certain king was dull or very dull, the door opened. King Louis stepped in without ceremony, in a plain coat, his expression lighter than before. Do I hear treason against my illustrious ancestor? He said. Henri grinned. He was very brave, Henri said, just not very interesting. That is what happens when history forgets to mention the jokes, the king replied. How are you today? Better, Elise said. I dreamed of horses. Soon we shall go see the real ones, he promised. He glanced at Claire, then at Julien. And my conspirators, he added. How fare you? We are beginning to run out of excuses for the children's complaints, Julien answered, which is a good sign. Their troubles now are the ordinary kind. Too much reading, Henri said. Not enough dessert, Elise added. Claire folded her arms. I see I am raising a pair of future tyrants, she said. Louis smiled. Better tyrants of puddings than of people, he answered. Claire, may I speak with you later, in the gardens? Of course, Your Majesty, she said. Julien's brows lifted just slightly. She pretended not to see. The king stayed a while, listening to Henri stumble through a paragraph and Elise recite a poem. Then he kissed their foreheads and left, taking a piece of the gloom with him as he went. When he was gone, Henri leaned toward Claire. What do you think father wishes to say? He whispered. Perhaps he will scold me for making you too bold, she replied. Then I shall defend you, Henri said at once. So shall I, Elise added. We owe you. Claire's throat warmed. You owe me nothing, she said. You owe yourselves the courage you have shown. Julien watched her as she moved about the room, gathering books. After a while he cleared his throat. I must return to the infirmary, he said. The world insists on having other sick people besides you two. How selfish, Henri said. Julien chuckled. I will come back later, he told Claire. Do not forget the walk. Fresh air is now officially part of the treatment, by royal decree mine. I would not dare ignore a physician's orders, she answered lightly. Their eyes met for a moment. Something unspoken passed between them, brief but bright. Then he was gone. Later that day, when lessons were finished and the children were settled with drawing and a set of carved soldiers, Madame Besson appeared at the nursery door. Governess, she said, His Majesty awaits you near the south garden. Do not keep him long. The kitchen is in uproar over tonight's supper. Is there ever a day when the kitchen is not in uproar? Claire asked. Not in this house, Besson said dryly. Go. Claire made sure the twins were content, then left, smoothing her dress as she walked. The title of governess still felt strange in her ears, but the work itself fit her more easily with each day. The south garden lay quieter than the grand terraces frequented by the court. A few bare branches still held on to their last blossoms. Gravel crunched softly underfoot. Birds hopped among the hedges, busy with their own affairs. The king stood near a stone balustrade looking out over the lawns. You keep my children busy, he said as she approached. Their complaints about boredom have lessened. I am grateful. They keep me busy as well, she replied. It is an excellent exchange. He smiled faintly. You were not afraid to accept the governess's role, he said. At least you did not show it. I was terrified, she answered. I just knew that saying so would not make the children less in need of care. He nodded slowly. I have been thinking, he said, of debts, of what is owed. No generosity can erase what happened, but there are things I can do that are more fitting than jewels or coins. You owe me nothing, she began. He raised a hand. I owe my children their lives, he said, which means I owe you and Julian more than words. I know you do not seek reward. That is precisely why I must offer something that serves you, not only my conscience. She fell silent, listening. When you have some leisure, he went on, I would like you to consider where you wish to be in a few years. Perhaps you will wish to remain with Henri and Elise until they are grown. Perhaps you will wish a house of your own, still near enough to them. When that time comes, I will see that you are not cast back into uncertainty. You will have a secure home, a modest one, but yours. Claire's eyes widened. A home, she repeated. For me, for you, he said. And for any family you may one day have. Governesses do not always remain unmarried. The court forgets this. I do not intend to. She looked down at her hands. I do not know what future I will choose, she said honestly. I know only that, for now, I belong by their side. And that is enough, he replied. The rest will come when it comes. I wanted you to know that when it does, you will not face it alone. She blinked away the sting in her eyes. Thank you, sire, she whispered. He studied her face. You and Julian, he said, have become close, I think. Heat rushed to her cheeks. We work together, she answered carefully. We share the same concern. I did not say it as reproach, he said gently. On the contrary, I am not blind. I see the way his eyes follow you when you leave a room. I see how your voice softens when you speak his name. She stared, speechless. The king chuckled softly. Young people always imagine their hearts are hidden, he said. They rarely are. Not to those who have once had hearts of their own. She found her voice. I do not know what he feels, sire, she said. I would not presume. Then ask him, Louis replied. Life does not give endless chances. I have learned that too late in some things. He straightened. I will not meddle more than this, he added. I will not play matchmaker, but if Julian someday asks my blessing for something, I will not refuse. Her breath caught. You are very kind, she said. I am very relieved, he corrected. The man who helps my children rise from their beds should not be chained forever to them, nor should the woman who taught them how to laugh again. If you both find joy together, the kingdom will be richer for it. He patted her shoulder once, fatherly, and turned back toward the palace. Go, he said over his shoulder. Take them to the gardens. Make them run. Let us see if the nurses can keep up for once. The days after that seemed brighter, as if someone had opened more windows in the palace. The twins' strength grew almost visibly. Henri progressed from careful steps along the corridor to sudden dashes that made every servant jump out of his way. Elise took to climbing every safe stair she could find, just to prove she could. You are exhausting, Claire told them one afternoon, as they chased a wooden hoop through the courtyard. You said you wished to chase us, Henri called back. We are only granting your wish. Ungrateful woman, Elise added with a mischievous smile. Julian watched from a bench, laughing, his physician's coat open. If they grow any stronger, he said, I shall prescribe a day of enforced napping. For you. For me, she asked. You look more tired than they do, he replied. She sat beside him, catching her breath. You are right, she said, but it is a good tired. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the children. They will not always need us this way, Julian said quietly. No, she agreed. One day they will ride off on their own horses and forget to come to the nursery at all. We will be forced to find other people to worry about, he replied. She glanced at him. I am sure the world has no shortage of fools in need of guidance, she said. He smiled. I can think of at least one, he murmured. Her heart skipped. She pretended she had not heard. The children's health became the quiet miracle of the palace. Courtiers gossiped less about cures and more about how strangely tall the prince had grown. The essence was not mentioned aloud, but its absence hung like a memory that everyone had agreed, silently, to learn from. One afternoon, when the air was warm enough at last to make the idea of the lake more than a distant hope, Henri burst into the nursery, panting. "Claire," he gasped, "pack something. Anything. We are not fleeing a war," she said. "Speak in full sentences." "Father is taking us to the lake," Elise cried, appearing behind him, cheeks glowing. "Today, now. He says the horses are already ready." "The lake," Claire repeated. "The lake," Julian confirmed, entering in time to hear. "The royal physician has approved the excursion, provided you bring hats and do not allow anyone to fall in. Then you must watch Henri," Elise said. "He is the one most likely to fall." "I do not fall," Henri protested. "I leap." They tumbled through preparations with joyous chaos. Hats were found. Coats were shrugged into and thrown off again. Shoes were checked. Claire stuffed a few cloths and bread rolls into a basket, just in case. Soon they were on a carriage road, the landscape shifting away from carved stone and into softer lines. Trees leaned over the path. The air smelled of water before they even saw the glint of it. The lake lay calm and wide, its surface catching the sky. Claire had never thought she would stand in such a place in the company of a king. Yet here she was, carrying a basket while Henri skipped stones, and Elise tried to count the ripples. Louis stood with them, more at ease than she had ever seen him. "I promised you," he said. "Do you remember?" "I remember everything," Elise replied. "Even when I wished I did not." She slipped her hand into Claire's. "Now I am glad I do," she added. They spent the day as if they were not royal at all. They walked along the shore. They ate bread and cheese and apples. Henri soaked his boots up to the ankles and pretended it was an accident. Elise found a feather and decided it was from some grand bird, even though Julian pointed out gently that it was from a very ordinary duck. At one point, when the children ran ahead chasing a frog that had no desire to be chased, the king fell back beside Claire and Julian. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what, sire?" Julian asked. "For this," Louis answered, gesturing at the children. "For a day that feels like life, not like survival." He studied them both. "I cannot give you back the months you spent in fear," he said. "I can only hope you build something good from what came after." Then he let them walk ahead while he pretended to be fascinated by a cluster of reeds. As the sun dipped lower, casting longer shadows across the water, the children grew quieter, pleasantly tired. On the journey back, they fell asleep against each other in the carriage, heads leaning together like two blossoms on one stem. Claire watched them, her heart full. Julian watched her. When they reached the palace, the evening had already drawn its thin veil over the sky. Servants moved quietly. The first candles burned. Claire saw the twins settled in their beds. They were asleep almost before their heads touched the pillows. "Stay with them a moment," she whispered to the nurse. "I will return to say goodnight properly." In the corridor she found Julian waiting. "Walk?" he asked. "Yes," she said. They moved together through the quieter halls, past windows that showed the last streaks of color fading from the sky. At the end of a long passage, a door opened onto a small terrace overlooking one of the side gardens. "Here," Julian said. "No one comes here at this hour. They prefer the grander views." The garden below was simple compared to the main ones. A few gravel paths, a stone bench, a small fountain where water murmured steadily. They descended the narrow stair and walked slowly along the path. "Do you remember," Julian said, "the first time we tested the essence in that little pantry?" "I remember the smell," she answered, "and your poor flower." He smiled. "I kept one petal," he said, "pressed in a book, to remind myself that even pretty things can be harmful, and to remind yourself that sometimes maids are right," she teased. "That too," he replied. They reached the fountain and stopped. The water whispered over the stone, unhurried. For a long moment, they stood without speaking. It was not an empty silence. It was full of everything they had lived through together. At last, Julian drew a breath. "Claire," he said, "may I speak plainly?" "You usually do," she answered softly. "This time I may be foolish," he said. "More foolish than when I examined flowers and argued with duchesses." "I doubt that is possible," she said, trying to keep her voice light. He turned to face her fully. "When I first came to this palace," he said, "I thought my purpose was clear. I would do my work quietly, rise slowly, and one day perhaps hold a secure position. I thought that was enough. A name on a door, a salary, respect." "And now?" she asked. "Now I know I was mistaken," he said. Respect without companionship is a cold meal. A title without someone to speak my name when the day ends is very little. Her heart began to beat faster. "Julian," she whispered. "I have watched you," he said, not as a confession of spying, but as a simple truth. "I have watched you risk your place to defend children who were not your own. I have seen you scold a king without realizing you were doing it. I have heard you turn fear into plain words that cut through fog thicker than any perfume." He reached for her hand, then hesitated, as if asking permission. She let her fingers rest in his. "I find," he said quietly, "that I do not wish to imagine a future that does not have you walking in it somewhere near me." She swallowed. "You think of the future often?" she asked. "Every hour," he replied, "because every hour the present reminds me how fragile it is." He looked down at their joined hands. "I have no estate to offer you," he went on. "No old name, no halls, no jewels. I have my work. I have a heart that has grown entirely too attached to the way you say my name. I have, thanks to a particular king, the promise of a modest house one day if I can bring myself to ask for it. And I have this question, which has been burning a hole in my thoughts for weeks." He lifted his gaze to hers. "Will you consider," he said, "spending your life with me? Not as governess and physician, though we may remain those things. As my wife." The word hung between them like a new star. She stared at him, her breath caught. "You are serious," she whispered. "Terrifyingly so," he said. She gave a small, unsteady laugh that turned quickly into something else. "I had prepared myself," she said, "to never hear those words. I told myself it was enough to see the children well, to have a room of my own, to know I had done something good. I did not dare hope for more. Hope is a reckless thing." "It is also the only reason we are standing here," he answered. Her eyes filled. "I am not of your world," she said. "I have no dowry. The court will talk. They will say you could have chosen someone with finer manners, finer dresses." "I prefer honest hands to fine gloves," he replied. "And if they talk, let them. They have talked about worse things. I have lived through far harsher whispers than he married for love." She laughed again, through tears now. "You are not supposed to say the word," she said. "What, love?" he asked. "It is late to be cautious." "I love you, Claire. I love your stubbornness. I love your terrible courage. I love the way you look at a problem as if it should be ashamed of itself. I love that you never once treated me as a savior, only as a partner." Her tears slipped free. "And I love you," she said. The words felt both new and very old. "I love that you doubted yourself more than your conscience. I love that you apologized to a flower you wilted. I love your ink-stained fingers and your crooked coat and the way you speak to the children as if they are small adults, not pieces of porcelain." His hand tightened around hers. "Then you will?" he asked, voice suddenly unsteady. "You will marry me?" "Yes," she said, without hesitation now. "Yes, 100 times yes." He let out a breath that sounded like he had been holding it for years. "May I—" he began, then stopped, smiling a little nervously. "May you what?" she asked. He raised their joined hands and pressed his lips gently to her knuckles. It was a simple gesture, old-fashioned, but it sent a warmth through her that no essence could ever mimic. "Thank you," he murmured against her skin. "For what?" she whispered. "For choosing a foolish physician with more ideals than sense," he said. "For choosing the only man who argued with a duchess on my behalf," she replied. Footsteps sounded on the gravel behind them. They turned. Henri and Elise stood at the edge of the path, breathless, cheeks flushed from running. "We knew it," Henri said triumphantly. "Knew what?" Claire asked, wiping her eyes quickly. "That you loved each other," Elise answered in a matter-of-fact tone. "We decided ages ago." "How long is ages?" Julian asked, amused. "Since the day you both spoke to father in the quiet room," Henri said. "The way you stood. You were on the same side. Only people who love each other stand like that." Claire stared at them, then began to laugh. "You have been spying on our hearts," she said. "We have been studying them," Elise corrected, "as Julian studies medicines." Carefully. Henri grabbed Julian's sleeve. "Does this mean you will always stay near?" he asked. "You will not go off to some distant town and leave us with dull doctors?" Julian looked at Claire, then at the children. "If your father permits," he said, "I will remain as long as I am useful. And even after that, I suspect you will find ways to visit and give me headaches. Elise turned to Claire. And you, she asked, will you still be our governess if you are married, or will you move to a grand house and forget to tell us stories? Claire knelt so they were all at the same height. I will not forget you, she said. I could live in a palace of my own and still hear your voices complaining about arithmetic. We never complain, Henri said. 3 of the 4 present raised their brows. All right, he conceded. We complain a little, Claire smiled through tears. Your father has already promised that when I one day have a house of my own, it will be near the palace, she said. So I may still watch over you, even when you are too tall to fit in the nursery. So you will be our governess and Julian's wife, Elise said thoughtfully. I approve. It is a relief to have your blessing, Julian said solemnly. The court's matters less. We will tell father at once, Henri declared. He will be pleased. He likes you both almost as much as we do. He grabbed Elise's hand. Come, he said. We must plan everything. The cake, the music, the part where I trip over my own feet in the ceremony. You will not be the one in the ceremony, Elise pointed out as they ran off. You will simply stand and stare and forget to bow. Claire watched them go, laughing. Julian slipped his arm lightly around her shoulders, a gesture that felt as natural as breathing. They take everything and turn it into a game, he said. They survived because they could, she replied. I do not wish to change that. Nor do I, he said. A few days later, in a small audience with the king, they stood side by side and made their request formally. Louis listened, a slow smile spreading as they spoke. I had hoped this day would come, he said. It is a rare gift to give 2 blessings at once. He placed a hand on each of their shoulders. You have my consent, he said. And more than that, you have my joy. He turned to Claire. The house I promised you, he said, will be yours as a wedding gift. It is small on the edge of the palace grounds, with a view of the gardens, close enough that the children can escape there when they grow tired of protocol if you will have them. Claire's eyes shone. I will always have them, she said. He looked at Julian. And you, Armand, he said. Do not forget that a physician's first duty is to his patients, but his first comfort is to his home. Do not mix the two so much that you neglect either. I will try, sire, Julian replied. I now have more reasons than ever to balance them well. The wedding, when it came, was not a grand spectacle. The court had seen enough grand spectacles. It was held in the small palace chapel with simple flowers and simple music. Henri and Elise stood on either side of Claire, holding the ends of her ribboned gloves as if they were leading her down an invisible path. Julien waited at the front, nervous and beaming. When the priest asked the traditional questions, their answers were clear, steady, free of hesitation. Afterward, in a modest reception room hung with a few garlands, the children insisted on making speeches. I am glad you are not leaving, Henri said to Claire, his voice unsteady but proud, because I still need help with my writing, and my father still needs someone to remind him to rest. I am glad you are marrying, Elise told Julien, because you look less lonely when you stand beside Claire, and because now we are certain you will never give us any dreadful perfumes. The room laughed. Claire and Julien exchanged a look that held a world of shared memory. Later, when the last cup had been emptied and the last guest drifted away, they stood together at the window of their new house, which smelled of fresh wood and lemon oil. The palace rose not far off, its many windows gleaming softly. Our home, Julien said quietly. Ours, she repeated. He slipped his arms around her, drawing her close, resting his forehead against hers. It was a simple embrace, but every piece of it felt earned. Do you ever think, he murmured, of how all this began? A coach in a muddy courtyard, 2 children too tired to lift their heads, a king drowning in remedies, a maid who was not supposed to see, and a physician who was not supposed to speak, she added. And yet you did, he said, and so did I. And here we are. She rested her head against his shoulder. The king spent a fortune looking for cures, she said, but in the end, the remedy was not in the bottles. It was in the truth. And in the stubbornness, he added. Do not forget that. She smiled. Sometimes I wonder, she said softly, how many other lives could change if people like us simply refused to pretend not to see? Perhaps more than we shall ever know, he answered. They fell silent, watching lights flicker in the distant windows where Henri and Elise now slept. strong and growing, their breathing unmarked by any scent but clean air. Claire thought of the path that had brought her here, the humiliation in the Golden Hall, the long nights of doubt, the quiet tests in hidden pantries, the confrontation in the king's chamber, the day by the lake, the moment by the fountain when fear and hope had finally met. She knew that not every story would end like this. Not every king would listen. Not every duchess would step back. Not every child would recover. But she also knew that wherever people dared to notice what others ignored, wherever someone chose honesty over comfort, something in the world shifted. She squeezed Julian's hand. "For the rest of our lives," she said, "let us promise each other one thing." "What?" he asked. "That we will not close our eyes when it is easier," she said, "even if it costs us, even if we stand alone." He lifted her hand to his lips again. "We will stand together," he replied. "That is the difference now." Outside, the night settled gently over Versailles. Inside the small house by the garden, a new chapter had begun, not with trumpets, but with a quiet vow between two people, who had learned that true nobility lay not in birth, but in the courage to protect, to heal, and to love. And somewhere in the great palace, two children slept peacefully at last, dreaming of lakes and horses and a governess and a physician who had taught them that even in a world of crowns and perfumes, the truest remedy was a heart that refused to be silent. Thank you so much for listening to this story all the way to the end. We hope it moved you as much as it moved us while telling it. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave us a comment telling us where you're listening from and what you liked the most. Rate this story from 0 to 10. What score would you give it? If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like as a show of support. That really motivates us to keep creating and sharing more stories full of emotion and life lessons. And before we go, we want to remind you that an exciting and heartwarming story recommendation will appear on the final screen. If you'd like to enjoy it, just click on the video. Thank you once again for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.